Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Bayer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
So welcome to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast, what we like to call BAM Stories. And today I've got a very special guest, a good friend I've gotten to know strictly on the internet. Jonathan Indino is in the Philippines, and we became friends along with a group of others. During the pandemic, we meet together every Friday afternoon for fellowship and challenge and iron sharpens iron and whatever else happens. It's a great time. And the other day I thought, Jonathan's got a great story. And so I wanted to get him on the podcast and let him tell it. So Jonathan Indino, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. It's a privilege and an honor to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, no, I'm glad you're doing it. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this. So on our Friday calls, we always call Jonathan by his last name because we have at least two others and sometimes three other Jonathans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's known as Indino, but people that don't know that will say, why do you call him by his last name? It's just, otherwise, if you say Jonathan, four people say what?
Yeah.
So I was just discussing with Jonathan before we started the episode, really the idea of just hearing his story, a little bit about his background, how he's worked in Indonesia as a missionary. His family's got a very deep missions background. His father's a theological teacher. There's a lot of history here. And somewhere in all of that, God led him to be in the business world. He hasn't left any of his ministry. But he's managed to integrate business into that. So just give us a little background, Jonathan, and even for those who are not that familiar with the Philippines and don't realize how many islands there are in the Philippines, tell us where you are and a little bit, just a little bit of your story.
So I'm Jonathan, and I own a small company, a BPO company here in the Philippines. We've been operating for 4 years, but I've been in the corporate world for 12 years. Actually, August is our anniversary month for when I actually started. But prior to that, I graduated from a Bible school. My wife also graduated from Bible school. So we're both ministers. We've been assigned to several churches. And my parents they met in the field. So my dad was a missionary, met my mom in Indonesia on a Bible school that he started and still going up to this from 1970 plus. And we were then assigned to a mission in the US, and we were sent for 13 years in Brazil. We went back to Indonesia, and I was assigned, when I graduated, I was assigned Indonesia for my internship. I was also assigned to Papua New Guinea, and we settled in the Philippines. Philippines has a couple of thousand islands, and it depends if it's high tide or low tide. So, so we're an island nation, and we were just talking a little bit earlier that we experienced everything from typhoons to earthquakes. We just felt a pretty big one last week, and so that's I started 12 years as an agent, and the beginning of how we started was really because we didn't have anything to eat anymore. And we just decided, we didn't have anything to eat. We were lacking like 50 cents to buy food. And I told my wife, because she was just laid off from McDonald's. I was laid off from my part-time work that I was working for an internet cafe while pastoring a church. And then I told her, why don't I just try a call center? Because I can speak English. So I think that's an advantage. And that's how it started. I discovered that I did very well in that field. And I said, if the Lord is leading me towards something and this will be able to help our ministry, so be it. And, 12 years later.
Yeah. So Jonathan, when you first started, you were already working. So you were already what we would call in the U.S. bivocational. I know I did that a couple of times in my own pastoral ministry, and it's a challenge, but there doesn't seem to be any real difficulty mentally that one is good, one is bad. Did you ever, as you started moving more and more into business in order to provide for your family, did you ever run into a a time when you felt like you were somehow leaving the ministry that God had called you to? Did you ever wrestle with that, or was it always pretty clear to you that business and mission go together?
In our churches here in the Philippines, not only if you're only really guaranteed to be able to survive from the ministry itself if you're part of a big organization, Southern Baptist, the local Catholic Church, or the local churches like Iglesia ni Cristo, and those. So that's when you're guaranteed that you can really live by the work that you do for the church. But for almost every other denomination, if you don't have a side job or something else, it doesn't work out. What pastors normally do, they marry teachers, they marry government workers, so that way the wife provides for the daily needs, and the pastor works with the church, which is considerably less amount. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how we want to look at it, both of us are ministers, so we never had the choice. And I when we chose to work, when I chose to work, and we found out that the income that I was earning would be 3 times more than what the church was providing us. The first thing that came to mind is, this will help us to be able to be at the church every week
Mm-hmm.
and be able to do visitations. So that was the mindset from the very beginning, that it wasn't yet like the BAM, where there's no difference really between the secular and the holy, but it was still there that one had to cooperate with the other, and we would make time for both. So when I was pastoring a church, for example, and I was a technical trainer in a call center, what happened was I would work like a 16-hour shift, and at the end of the shift, run to Sunday, and my members would be texting me saying, "Where are you? Can we start like the songs now? Or should we do offertory song first before
Yeah.
your message?" Or so just make sure that I get on time, and then
Yeah.
I do my sermon, do the Sunday school, do the sermon, and they open the door for me to go to my bedroom and just fall asleep. So they're like, "Okay, pastor, just collapse." But and we were able to support the ministry, both children's ministry, our own ministry, to be able to provide for ourselves, so it would not burden the church that much. And it's been a fulfilling journey. I mean, I always tell my members, before I was in the business world, I used to drive a single motorcycle, like a taxi, and I had like the hours that I needed to work for gasoline, and had the hours that I needed for the food on the table, and I also had hours for that I wanted to give to the ministry. So if we had a project at church, and I'm gonna work for like 4 hours, and the income that I earn on those 4 hours, that's gonna be something I give to the Lord. And it felt good. It felt very, very good, and that had just amplified because we were able to help more people at a bigger scope.
So, Jonathan, you mentioned Brazil, and just to me, one of the most interesting parts of our relationship is there's another fellow from Brazil who joins our Friday afternoon Zoom call periodically, let me get this right. So you discipled him, right? You discipled Danny, or I know your dad was a big piece of that in Brazil.
My dad, we were assigned to Brazil, at southern part of Brazil in Paraná, and my dad opened a Bible school. And Danilo's dad was one of the first, and mom were one of the first Bible students that enrolled. And it changed his father's life, and the trajectory of his entire family changed after that. And we also, for the 13 years that we were there, our family was super close. So it was more of my dad discipling him. But what I did, discipling Danilo's father, but with Danilo, I am going to take credit. I helped him learn how to walk. Like I remember very vividly me holding his hands and teaching him how to walk under a table tennis table that served as our dining room as well. So
Uh,
we I remember that. I remember his goofy haircut and everything. It was amazing, amazing that we met after after almost 30 years.
That is amazing. Well, I'm hoping that Danilo will listen to this podcast and get a good laugh out of it. He's been a guest as well early on in the series.
Mhm, yes.
Yeah, so you did well. You taught him how to walk, and somebody taught him how to walk with the Lord, and he's a truly faithful brother. So,
Yes, amazing.
tell us a little bit about just when you started shifting away from working. I mean, you've done all kinds of things. You've had a motorcycle taxi. You worked, for call centers. You've done just all kinds of things, and then you went out on your own. What led that? I'm intrigued with this because a lot of our listeners are Western and not necessarily
Mhm,
American, but a lot of Western. And you are, but yet you kind of have one foot in both worlds. It seems like. So the
mhm,
Western group tends to still struggle with the sacred secular dichotomy. You never did.
mhm,
You just looked at business as a way to provide for your family. So it's what you did, and you used it to provide for ministries. What you did, I'm certainly hoping more people will get that mindset and realize that there is
mhm.
no difference. But as you're in the working world, when did you get the idea? When did God begin to plant the idea of having your own company?
Yeah, that's a story that whenever I retell that story, I get amazed as well as how it happened. So when I started working in the call center and we found out that the income that a normal agent was earning was three times what we were earning at the church, we really thought, oh Lord, we're gonna be rich, we'll have a house, we'll have a car, but it was just above minimum pay. But then I found out that I had a knack for customer service, and I had a knack for the corporate world, and I was amazed by everything that was happening, the coaching styles, leadership styles, things that you could, core values that each company had. So what I did was I said, if God's going to put me here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to absorb everything that I can, and I will get what I learned at church and the Bible school, and I try to apply it here. But whatever good things that I learn here, I'll try to to get to my own ministries and see if I can, you know, increase effectiveness, increase productivity to be able to market our ministry, our church. Those things, those are not taught in Bible school. But if you look at the church as something that as the gospel, something that you have to market, you have to be able to share with people and get maximum exposure. That's something that you learn in the corporate world. So I found out that hard work really pays when you work in a good company. So every other year, I was getting promoted. So I got promoted to lead a team. I was promoted to be a technical trainer, senior trainer, and I almost got an operations manager in 4.5 years of working there. And then I got poached to other companies because of my experience. And it came to a point where the higher I went to the in the corporate ladder, I saw things that I didn't like, and I saw things that I was being asked to do that was entertain clients, and sometimes those clients want certain things, and I was thinking, no, I don't think that I'm gonna grow anymore
Mm.
over here. So I thought, let me go do freelancing, try to be the owner of my own time, and work from home, and that's what happened. And I decided I'm going to go back to an agent, and I'm going to clock in, clock out, and do ministry because that's where I'm supposed to be doing, not spending my time going up. And what I found out was that that was the Lord's way of sort of start preparing me for that. So I worked freelance for a company, a SaaS company, and I was doing so well that after a year I got promoted to a team lead position. And then I said, okay, I don't want this, but it's better me than to have somebody else and just destroy the opportunity that we had. And it was me and my sister that we were working in the same company. So eventually they said, we want to put up a office in the Philippines because we have like 9 people already working. And they said, we need to find a company that will absorb us. And I tried contacting everybody I knew. I knew a lot of people, and nobody really wanted to get a small nine like with a headcount of only 9 people, and to
Mm.
do that because they would not be able to arrange the salaries and all. So what happened was that I started helping them and telling this is a process that you need. The labor code is like this, taxation things, and all of that. And then the CEO said, you know a lot about this. Why don't you just open your own company? Let's be your first client. And and that was weird for me because that wasn't part of my plan. And I had moved out from the corporate world so that I could just clock in, clock out. And then here I am given a position, here I am, given opportunity. And we prayed a lot. And I went back a couple of years to when I left to become a freelancer. And the reason why I didn't want to continue work in the corporate world, especially if my position went even higher, was because there were things that were being done that were not in line with my own values. And so I thought, maybe this is God, pointing me to a direction where I wanted always to be sort of in the forefront of ministries and to be able to preach and teach. But here God was allowing me to gain an opportunity to be more on the background, but pushing ministry forward. So being able to disciple other people and then pushing those people forward financially and helping them in whatever way. And I decided sometimes you're a fan, sometimes you are the people that are left behind doing the support. And that's how it went. And God led us to a very successful first 2 years, very successful first 2 years. And the success that we got, nobody could really say that it was our own. And we got opportunities to help a lot of people, especially during some of the major earthquakes that we've had in southern Philippines. And we transformed our business to a bad business. And I got the opportunity to lead the company the way that I thought it was, the best way to lead it, especially in the sense of culture. Whenever I talk to my managers, I always say, no, I put up this company. I accepted this opportunity to put this company because I want us to be led in a certain way. And I want us to be able to reflect our beliefs through our work and, be as as close as possible to business and mission together. And this was even before I heard about that. So and I thought that the opportunity was good because I felt constricted being in a corporate world, being an employee. And there are sometimes that that you're going to be asked to do certain things that is expected of your position and your role, and you can't really be an activist in another person's company.
I always go back to Joseph or Daniel and
Mm-hmm.
how hard it was for them, to remain faithful. They did, and you did,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't easy. So some of the things, and I heard you share this when you were doing a pitch for some investors a few months back, and you were talking about the different ways that your company has brought ministry, has brought discipleship to your employees, your communities. Share some of that with us, if you would.
It's very difficult with schedules to be able to create like ministries within the city that that we can work together. And when we actually got our boom, when we actually grew to a position where we could start doing something good, the pandemic hit, right? So it was a bad thing. We were founded in 2018, and then 2019 was when we really boomed, and we were able to help a lot of people on the earthquake. So we started with relief goods. So we would use our company car, get as much food, clothes, and everything, and we would go to some of our partner churches where they were hit the most. And because our car was an SUV, we were able to go to really deep in the mountains to places where entire villages were wiped out. They could never go back because new fault lines were created and all of that. And it was a very satisfying opportunity to do that because we were not doing it only by ourselves, but our people were raising the funds. We were doing the repacking of the goods inside our office, and we have like pictures of people taking calls while other people are with, putting foods and repacking everything. And we also had employees with us go there, and we would share the gospel to the people that we were ministering. And the church, our local church that was we were working with, and the local government, they would do the follow-ups afterwards. So we did pretty well in that area. We also opened up indigenous group for children that their parents had lost their parents had lost some of their jobs for because of COVID and because of modernization of some of the tools for harvesting, and that indigenous side, the kids would eat like once a day. So we started a ministry with them as well. We partnered with another local organization, and we would send funds, and we would go there and also participate with them. So we were able to expand our ministry and other ministries that we did with just financial assistance and being able to help them that way. So and we were always open for for seminars or lectures or invitations to speak and to share our experience with whoever wanted to listen to it. So those were the opportunities that we did, and we tried to involve our people as much as possible. With the pandemic easing out, we're going to restart some of those children's ministries again, and bring some of our teachers, because one of the things that we had opportunity to work with was online teachers. So we have tons of teachers, and we want to get to them involved directly, and that will give us the opportunity to expose our own people with with ministry. And what we do is we count it more than just ministry. We don't talk about ministry. We say it's social work, it's a reach out program, a give back program that we have. So we've allocated a specific amount, percentage of every month to be able to help them, and get to see how many people will be involved, and we can then post that on our group chats, and make people see and make me interested in seeing that what they're working for is not just to line up my pockets, but also to have an impact with the community around us.
We'll be right back after a short break. Third Path Initiative is your go-to site for accessible, affordable BAM training. Learn about the biblical foundations for business as mission, ethical capitalism, BAM strategies, and how to become a kingdom employee. It's all at thirdpathinitiative.com.
I think it's very encouraging to me to hear the way that you're doing so much of your ministry, your business community impact, and the gospel ministry and serving ministry is happening with and through the local church.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've seen a lot in BAM globally is that sometimes the ministry work is done separate from the church, and there are reasons why that may be the right thing to do in some places. But seeing it done in partnership with the local church, so that the local church, you say, they're there to do follow-up and to have ongoing relationships. And all of this is wrapped around the concept of discipleship. I mean, your employees,
Mm-hmm.
some of whom may not be believers, are even out there doing these things,
Mm-hmm.
rubbing shoulders with believers, seeing and hearing the gospel. That's a powerful thing to consider.
Yeah, I'm the international representative for Grace Beyond Borders International. So our mission also is a little bit different in the way that we do it. We're not necessarily planting churches, but we want to be, especially with countries like the Philippines, which is very saturated already with churches. Instead of opening a new organization, what we want to be able to do is to help existing organizations, help them grow, help them learn that there is this possibility to have this type of ministry. So they might not be well equipped to start something like that, like feeding programs or things like that, and then we come in and we help them with that. And so when taking that same concept, we put that to our own own business, because we don't have the manpower and time to do follow-ups. We don't have the manpower and time to do discipleship, right? And we don't want to evangelize somebody, get somebody to become a believer, and then just leave them to
Right.
become babes in Christ forever, and eventually go back to what they were doing and not bear fruit. So what we want to be able to do is to partner with a local organization, be that a church or a mission, that allows us to help them to boost something, and then help them with the follow-ups, like mentoring, and apply what we have. So we put this amount of money and this amount of energy. So how is it doing? And make those type of follow-ups that normally, some people that try to support local churches, they just pour money into it and expect something in return. So what we want to do is to be able to put some money into it, put some effort into it, and then that allows us to be checks and balances, not necessarily as to how the funds are being used, but how much effort we're putting to making sure that those people are not left behind.
Yeah.
And we just don't want to check marks. I evangelized 5 people today, and then just leave it at that.
Right.
We want to be able to bring them back to the church, not for membership, but to be able to guide them eventually if they become members. That's a good thing for the church. But yeah, I think being able to partner up with local organizations that will be able to take it further than what we can, and we become like the just giving nudges here and there and helping people to let's start something. You need this, let's work with that. And yeah, it's much easier for us, and I think people are more happy when they're able to not just, be like just have money poured in and expect something when you don't try to equip them as well with follow-up opportunities and things like that.
No, that's tremendous, and it's a very powerful story. So this time 3 years ago, your company Indino, for those who are going to check it out, it's the letter N, the letter D, and then Knows. Indino, very clever play on the name Indino. But if you want to check the company out, by the way, it's ndknows.com, and that'll be in the show notes. But so this time 3 years ago, 2019. And you were booming.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the pandemic hit the Philippines very, very hard, just like it did most places. And you kind of ran aground. What happened?
Yeah. So in 2019, we were doing very well, and we were expected to grow, I think, 3 or 4 folds with the renewal of a contract from our Chinese client. One of the biggest things that happened was that 2 things happened. We lost one of our clients, the original client that we had. We lost it, but we still had this huge client, the Chinese client, and the problem that happened was something that was absolutely out of our control. It had nothing to do with the pandemic, because with the pandemic, that company actually was doing pretty well because a lot of the kids were at home, so we had like classes, and it was a ramp up in such a scale that that we had to get additional office spaces. So we had to invest in office spaces and equipment, and we were ready for this great boom that when the pandemic would lift towards June or July of 20, what was that? 3 weeks for the flat line or something like that. So,
yeah, we all laugh at that. 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
yeah, flattening the curve. So, we had that as well, and it became 2 months, and and now we're at 2 years. But it was all good because we would be able to bring people. This is one thing that we loved about the pandemic, is that we had a shuttle service that my dad, who was stuck here in the Philippines, became our driver. So every time that people would, so every single member of our company was exposed to the gospel because their driver was a doctor in theology. And so we were able to share the gospel with everybody, and we were happy about it because we were going to purchase a additional car so that we would be able to bring people from their homes to the office so that they would not have been exposed. But the Chinese government changed a couple of things. They banned tutoring for kids up until K10, I think, and that was the biggest demographic of students. So what happened was that with that ban, and there were a couple of things like English requirements that were removed from the schools and universities, that made essentially tutoring was too expensive for the normal Chinese family, and the government said, you can't spend this much, and so there was like thousands and thousands of teachers were affected, and and this client of ours said, we're going to be branching out to something else. So please stay with us. And so we stayed faithful with them. We tried other things, and it was very difficult for almost a year and a half now, around 18 months, where we went from being a $500,000 company to almost zero, and with the help of the needle, we were able to bounce back a little bit. And now with our client, the Chinese client, they are in a totally different business. We're still with them, and we're one of their major vendors for them. And we're at half of revenue. Speaking of revenue, we're at half. That's what we were last year because it's a different business model. But we're bouncing back. I mean, we're bouncing back in such a way that it's hard for me to understand while we were going through it.
I know there were times that you probably felt like you weren't going to make it. And what listeners might find hard to believe is that you worked sometimes 2 and 3 other jobs and kept the company going either through your sister or through your wife. I mean, this was in the U.S. we call it an all hands on deck kind of experience, and you guys did that. You just pulled together. You sought the Lord. You worked as hard as you possibly could. And so I know from my side, being your friend and your brother, watching you start stepping back out into a more sunlight, so to speak, has been fun. But it is, it was painful. We didn't, in fact, a lot of us who know you well did not know all that you were going through till maybe halfway through it. But it's been quite a time. But I guess the point I want to make here is that I think there are a lot of people in the world of business as mission, or who are seeking to life in general, but especially in business as mission, they run into hard times and they feel like God's abandoned them, or they must have made a mistake. They don't know what to do. And the answer is be faithful, right? I mean, and like you did, take another job, enlist more help, get people to be praying for you. You guys were faithful, and I know God didn't reward you for that. I mean, it's all grace, but He enabled you to stand and to hang in there. I feel like there's an encouragement. I hope you'll write about it someday for others who are going through really deep water. It's just so easy to feel like God's forgotten you, God's abandoned you, God's forsaken you, and He hasn't. And you prove that. And now, as you said, you're starting to come back out. I know you're tired. I know it's been a long, long season. But you've hung in there, and God has met you in some amazing ways, and I know He's taught you some amazing lessons. So as we draw this particular conversation to a close, let me ask you, if you look back over those difficult times, and I know it's not all sunshine and roses right now either, but during some of the harder times, what were some of the lessons that you feel like the Holy Spirit taught you that you would want to share with other people who are seeking to follow Christ in business?
There's this verse that says that, that 2 Corinthians 10:13, I believe, it talks about three things. The first thing is that no temptation comes to man that is special to us. In other words, there's no problem that comes to us that is made just for Jonathan, right? God is going to create a problem for you that is just for you, and you're that special. And I always like to say that misery loves company, which means that once you find out, when you share your problems, and for example, when we talk about the financial problems that we were experiencing, everybody on our calls said, I've been there, I've done that, I've experienced that. And I know it's bad to hear that, but the Bible tells us, that it's not special, which means that somebody else has experienced that. And it feels good to know that other people were miserable the same way that you were before.
But it is true, right? Well, part of the lie of the devil is this is just you. You're the only one, and you're not.
Yeah, and we're special, but not in that way. And and the second part of the verse says that God is faithful, that He's not going to give any problems to you that you can't handle. And for me, that was the most difficult part of the verse. Because you would look at the problems that I was experiencing at the time. I went through some mental health issues and all that, just to be able to, and faith also, right? One of the catalysts that made us lose the client is because I decided, there's a couple of things that we're doing that are not right, and we have to correct course. And part of that correct coursing, ethical correct coursing was losing the client. And so what happened was, I said, no, I'm experiencing all of this. Now that I'm trying to do the right thing, right? And what happened was that I went back to some of our own podcasts with my dad, and some with my own preaching and notes, and that verse came up, and it just kept coming up, and I said, "Stop preaching to yourself, because it's embarrassing." And when I found out, one of the lines that I would say is, if you see somebody that is experiencing a huge problem, those are the people that you want to be close to. Why? Because those are the people who God is faithful. So God knows that person can handle that much trouble. And I was looking at my own life and I said, oh Lord, I don't want to be this strong because it hurts. And but I said, okay, so I can handle this, right? I can handle it. And it's like God had He was weighing my capabilities and putting the last little ounces of trouble just so that it's just right as to how much I can handle. And the third part of the verse says that all we have to do is to look around and God will provide a solution. And the moment that I stopped mourning for my losses and being self-pity for a couple of weeks, I said, okay, let's look for a solution because God has provided one. And I found a job. We found a way to pivot what we were doing and no longer work at an office, and we cut overhead almost 90%. and we found a staff augmentation for IT, and that's where Danilo's industry was focused on. We did a couple of lead generation for them and for other companies, and we changed totally the industry that we only have one customer service client right now, and it's a very small part of what we did, and that was what we thought was our forte. So looking back at that verse, I looked at myself, I looked at the problems that we we're currently experiencing, and say, okay, I'm not alone in this. This is not unique. Therefore, there's probably a solution, and this is not about me, right? And and I can handle this because God is the one that's allowing this to happen. And even if I'm not rewarded, like you said, even I'm not rewarded with being faithful, just the experience itself is something that we absorb and learn, and adapt and change, because God loves us for not necessarily for who we are, but for the potential that we can become. And I think that's the lesson that we learned, and the lesson that if somebody's gonna hear my story, please at least get that part right. Get that part right, that that God is not making special problems for you. He's not. That's not how he operates. He's not going to allow things to happen to you that are beyond your capabilities. So the more difficult the problem, the bigger the impact of the problem. That's just how much God trusts in your capabilities. So the bigger the problem. So that's why you don't know about my problems, because when I have problems, I'm smiling. Oh, okay. So this is what you think I can do. Okay, let's do it. Then all I have to do now is just to open my eyes and open my eyes and see if maybe I'm not seeing something. And normally God provides that solution, and it's beautiful when it happens.
Yeah. Well, it is, and so I'm guessing that some listener, or maybe many listeners to this podcast, are going to want to reach out and say, "Hey, Jonathan, can you talk to me about that?" And I know the pastoral heart in you says absolutely. So, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Would they just send you an email, Jonathan at indinose.com?
My email address is jhindino, INDINO, at nd-knows, KNOWS.com. And I'll be happy to talk about anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I know Jonathan means that. It's funny when he talks about smiling. So when he joins our calls on Friday afternoon here in the eastern part of the U.S., and people are from all over the world. We have people from Australia and different places. But when Jonathan joins, it is 4 o'clock in the morning.
4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but he's smiling. He's just engaged, and that's who he is. So, Jonathan, we could go on. We're going to call it for today. This will be a good time for us to kind of stop. And thank you for speaking with us, and thanks for sharing your experience. And I know that people are going to find encouragement in that. Maybe somebody going through a really hard time right now is going to just hear what you said there at the end and go, yeah, that resonates with me. That speaks to my heart and makes a difference. So
thanks for having me. I really hope that helps somebody out there.
I'm sure it will, brother. So thank Jonathan Indino. Email is jhindino, INDINO, at nd-knows.com. And again, that'll be in the show notes. And I would encourage you guys, light him up. Reach out and have a conversation with him. He's always an encouragement to me as well as just a good friend. So, Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or tryventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen. If you'd like to help with expenses and expansion of the Business as Mission podcast, you can become a donor through Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/BAM Stories. This podcast is brought to you by generous donors and sponsors. You can become one by going to patreon.com/BAM Stories.